Olivier. Thanks for having me here tonight. So my area, I'm a professor of education policy and practice in the area of youth studies, and I've worked with students and teachers throughout the last few decades in formal capacities with organisations like the International Baccalaureate, but also in a variety of research capacities in Australia and France, from France to Canada, from the UK to Alco Island to the north of this country. And I just wanted to quickly or to briefly talk about some of the findings of that in the area of uncertainty. There's a bit of a bellwether at the moment in relation to current circumstances in relation to uncertainty. And I just wanted to talk a little bit at a kind of a high level about how do we educate for uncertainty and what might it look like for young people, and what does the world look like for young people as they're leaving school and making their transitions into further work, study and life. So, in 10 minutes, let's go. So, when we look at the labour force in the last 20, 30 years, we see remarkable changes to the working lives of young people. I could show you a graph, and I just want you to imagine it, of full-time job opportunities for teenagers that have been steadily on the decline since the 1980s, and there is nothing to suggest that that trend will change. On the other hand, we've seen growing participation in schooling and education, which is a good thing. Those who participate in education do fare well across a range of indicators in relation to life, well-being and so forth. But there are caveats there. So in relation to job opportunities for young people who are just following school or leave school, they are becoming more and more scarce, and it puts them at particular risk of becoming disengaged from work and life. And we look at data across year upon year, and we see some trends emerging, that those who are most at risk are likely to leave school early, they're likely to live in a regional or remote area, they're likely to come from a low SES background, they're likely to be Indigenous, and they're likely to have a disability. Those are the most at-risk categories. But working life itself has transformed, and the nature of labour markets is particularly so. So what are some of those changes? Well, we see persistent levels of unemployment amongst young people, and in Australia it's around 2 to 3 times that of the overall population. It's similar to the UK year on year. Rates of unemployment in recent years have in fact declined. These are in part due to the way we measure unemployment, which is a whole other subject, but they're also due to the fact that the nature and types of employment is changing. And so when you hear about challenges to young people in worlds of work, I would draw you to one particular trend, which is underemployment. So underemployment refers to those who want to work more but can't. And the rates of underemployment, where people want to work more but they're unable to get the hours, is on a very, very sharp increase, almost in reverse proportion to recent unemployment rates. It's heading up between around 15 to 20% according to what are called underutilisation figures. Underutilisation refers to rates of unemployment plus rates of underemployment. This is borne out in the research directly with young people themselves. And when I'm talking about young people, I'm primarily talking about 15 to 24, although those age levels are somewhat permeable. So we see these cases of young people who are mixing multiple jobs in a highly casualised workforce, who are seeking more work, but they can't. And at a sociological level, something's really interesting is going on there. One of the things that comes up again and again, whether you're in Australia, whether you're in Paris, or whether you're in southeastern UK, you will see that young people struggle with an ability to plan. And this is occurring across life cycles. So very good research to come out of the University of Melbourne. The Life Patterns Project highlights this particular characteristic. They have an inability to plan, whether it be for meeting with their mum on the weekend, through to planning for longer term life decisions such as starting a family, settling in a home. One reason for this, of course, you immediately detect is the exorbitant prices of houses. But it's also the nature of the labour market that inhibits their ability to build up these kinds of things that we need in order to plan for those things. So, for example, getting a loan might be a struggle because you're in casualised work. This is starting to characterise the labour force more widely. It doesn't just apply to those at-risk groups. And in fact, what we're seeing in the literature and what we're seeing in the international research is a severing of the opportunity bargain. Now, the opportunity bargain refers to the promise that more education and training will lead to better jobs and life. The young people that I've spoken to with my colleague Roz Black are painfully aware of this severing of the opportunity bargain, but push on nonetheless. The nature of their mobility has changed so that they no longer see themselves necessarily as rooted one place. And in fact, when we look at longitudinal data, they'll go back from home somewhere else, and then back again, as well as settling in other areas. So there is this fluidity in the working of the workforce, and it has very, very important social implications. One of which we might see the delaying of decisions later into life, like starting a family, which is just edging outwards later in life. The other thing that's salient to uncertainty in relation to what we're experiencing this week is the fact that economic downturns have an immediate and disproportionate impact on young people, and they consistently do when there are downturns. So young people are amongst the groups that feel it first, and these economic downturns have a long tail, which means that when they become disengaged during an economic downturn, then it's difficult for them to become re-engaged, for many of them anyway. And we saw this particularly potently in the global financial crisis of 2007-2008, where we literally saw tens of thousands of Europeans scattered across Europe, and I'm thinking of people from Spain in particular, in search of work opportunities and study opportunities. Some, on the other hand, ended up rooted back in the villages where they came from, because that was the only place where they could find security. So the corollary of uncertainty is an inability to plan and a lack of security. And security is the thing that young people have in common with all of us. There is a desire for some degree of security. So we have this uncertainty taking place. That uncertainty is manifest in other parts of life, which I could talk about in further detail on some other occasion, no more visible than in the political domain, where we see what's called choice-based politics emerging, where the old orthodoxies, left and right, belonging to a political party or a trade union, are in sharp decline. And voting patterns are becoming more and more wild, particularly amongst younger groups. And they tend to gravitate towards issues, which is where the phrase choice-based politics comes from. Tend to gravitate towards issues of concern, such as climate change. Corollary of that is that the distance between themselves and their elected representatives is becoming wider and wider across time. Research has been tracking this for decades. It's become quite deeply embedded, and it's riding a kind of political chicane that is, increasing this feeling of uncertainty. But I just wanted to leave you with a thought, and the thought that's been rattling around in my head. It's just an opinion. And that is, what is uncertainty? Because we as educators are told that the workforce is changing, we have the impact of technology, automation, other things that are changing what type of education we need to produce to prepare young people for the world. I'm uncertain about the idea of uncertainty. What do I mean by that? We've always experienced uncertainty, and we all experience uncertainty, so imagine that as being a kind of a given. And I think you could go back to just about any epoch and locate feelings of uncertainty. But I want to know, and what I want to understand is the degree to which that's something that is evident and persistent in human life, and that which is being generated, produced by forces, discourses, things going on in the world that are skewing the way we see the future and young people's relationship to the future. So, for example, the economic certainty is often linked to things like technological change. But it's rooted in something far more significant, I think, and that's the deregulation of financial markets around the 1980s. Yes, there are technological factors going on and increasing uncertainty, but we've seen the erosion of certain kinds of social contracts and bonds, as well as wider labour market changes that have been predicated on an idea of uncertainty. So then it boils back to the other question that I've been asking, and that I've been asking teachers with another colleague from Monash. And it always generates an interesting response. And in these last 30 seconds, I'll outline what that is. We've asked teachers in a couple of countries about how they deal with difference. And a hypothetical example was put to them of a student who met a homeless person on excursion. The homeless person asked for money, and the student came back to the school and asked one of us, "What should I have done?" It's a very pointed question, because we want to understand where teachers feel as though their responsibility extends. Because of course you would get the expected responses. It's up to the family to determine it. We teach critical thinking. It's up to them to problem solve and so on and so forth. You can guess the variety of responses. But then I put, leading through a series of questions, we put another question to them, which was, how should we live? Think about that. How should we live? Because I think it is the burning question that should be on every educator's mind and should be informing how they're preparing young people for uncertainty. How should we live? What makes it prickly is it's a moral question. Now, I'm not advocating a particular belief system or worldview, but if we look at climate change, if we look at responding to pandemics, if we look at labour market change, we need to be thinking about students going into this world with an idea of how should we live. Now, I have to apologise because I'm going to stick around for a few more of the presentations, but this week it's my daughter's 6th birthday, and I'm going to go and be with her because this research is as much about her as it is about us. Thanks for your time.